My sister and her husband have been struggling with infertility since they got married 12 years ago. They've tried absolutely everything, from medical to spiritual, but unfortunately, nothing works. Now that she's approaching late 30s, they're starting to look into adoption, but it's also been a slow going. Since their financial condition isn't exactly stable from multiple rounds of fertility treatments they went through. I can only imagine the struggle, and I sympathize with her. But the stress this situation is bringing her and her husband honestly puts a strain on our relationship. My husband and I lost our best friends, Mason and his wife, Kate, 2 weeks ago in a horrible car accident. They left behind their son Pete, who isn't even 2 yet. It was so sudden and so heart-wrenching. We're still grieving, which lowers out contact with a lot of people, including my sister and Bil. Our main concern right now is ourselves and Pete, whose custody has come to us because we're both his godparents. Actively engaged in Pete's life since his birth. And because Mason and Kate have neither left a will nor have immediate living relatives who can take him in. We've decided to adopt Pete as soon as we can stomach the process. My husband and I never planned on having kids, and even if we did, this is absolutely not the way we want to go about it. The situation is far from ideal, but we're starting the adoption process yesterday, for Pete's safety if nothing else. We broke the news to our extended families and friends, letting them know that my husband and I won't be very available for a little longer because of this. I know my sister and brother-in-law will have something to say about this. I'm prepared for a few heated text messages or voicemails. However, I didn't expect them to turn up on our doorstep, crying about how unfair it is that we were given everything they wanted, and how we didn't deserve to be parents because we didn't go through what they had to. I've never seen my husband so angry before. He's usually very mild and gentle, but recent events have stretched our patience to the limits. We kicked them off of our porch, and I told my sister before she left that since our pain inconveniences her so much, I won't have her around me and my family at all anymore. I know she made a fuss about it, and now everyone has something to say to us. We turned off our phones, so we don't know which ones are cursing us and which one aren't. I know some did //r. My husband and I are both in pain and grieving, and we can't trust ourselves to be objective. For the sake of disclosure, my husband and I are both men. No, this is not a case of homophobia. My sister, for all her fault, was the first person to accept me for who I love. So, my fiancé took up cooking during quarantine. We used to cook little and instead ate a lot out of the house. We could afford it and tended to eat healthy. Of course, we can both cook, but given our busy schedule, it was easier to eat out. Also, to be honest, I don't really like cooking and consider it a chore to be avoided. I love food, but there are other things that I would rather do in my own time. Due to quarantine, my fiancé has decided to cook more and has found that she enjoys it a lot. This is great. I am happy for her that she has discovered something new that brings her joy. Turns out she's pretty good at it too, and she cares about learning new skills, etc., so I benefited too. I still don't really like cooking myself, as I said, so in exchange for her putting all that effort into cooking, I help her out by paying for takeout in the evenings when she doesn't feel like cooking, and also I do everything else, wash the dishes, clean the table, etc. on the days she cooks. To the best of my knowledge, she agreed that this was an appropriate compromise, and of course, if she felt it was unfair, I would be happy to fill the gap in other ways. But she seemed to enjoy it. As her culinary experiments expanded into baking and became more complex overall, she began to involve me in cooking. I would go into the kitchen to have a drink and check it out, and she would say, "Oh, could you help me chop this while I fry this?" Or something like that. I cut carrots for her or something like that, chatted with her about food, and then went back to my business. I didn't mind it at all. But gradually I became her sous chef, especially when she wants to cook food together. Keep in mind that her culinary experiments are complex and sometimes take 2 or more hours. So my whole evening goes into these culinary endeavors, and it happens several times a week. On top of that, she tends to boss me around in the kitchen and can be a little rude. As you can probably guess, we got into a fight over this. I told her that I don't like her attitude in the kitchen when I help, and I don't like to cook in general. I would feel better helping her if she wasn't so rude to me. But honestly, I don't want to spend 8+ hours every week cooking. It's not my hobby, it's hers. If she wanted me to take part in cooking, I bought everything or cooked something simple. She was very upset. She said it was unfair, that I was enjoying the fruits of her labor but not doing my part. And that cooking took 2 hours and dishwashing / cleaning only half an hour. I told her that it was her decision to cook very complex dishes and that I would be happy if she made a simple pizza or roast. After a certain point, the sophistication of her dishes moves into hobby territory. And I resent being made to feel like a bad partner because I don't want to spend a few evenings on her hobby. We haven't really worked it out. I actually bought / cooked my own food a few times so I didn't enjoy the fruits of her labor. But that seemed to upset her even more, and our refrigerator started to fill up with more leftover food than she could eat herself. Another time I helped her but told her I had to go on video chat at 8 p.m. and she got upset when I actually stopped helping, and left even though I told her beforehand. I'm afraid I told her somewhat caustically that I was not her sous chef to command the kitchen. I tried to discuss it with her again when we felt calmer. I told her that I liked that she found a new hobby. But it's her hobby and I can't help it and don't want to feel obligated to do it. She countered that it was not feminist of me to put the cooking on her and benefit from it without helping her. The feminist connection doesn't make much sense to me because neither of us used to cook much. And she decided to take up cooking herself, but of course I didn't tell her that. I told her that if she wanted to discuss the division of labor in our household, we could do so and come up with something new that reflected the fact that she now cooks more. We tried to do this, but she wanted to count all the time she spends cooking as time around the house. So, according to her ideal distribution of housework, she spends over 10 hours cooking just dinner each week, which somehow leaves me with almost all other chores around the house. I told her I didn't like it because cooking complicated meals is a hobby. It's not fair to say that 6 / 10 hours of her housework is actually her hobby, and I have to do the equivalent amount of real housework if that makes sense. So we are in a bit of an impasse. Am I really a bad feminist? I don't think I'm wrong. I'm very familiar with emotional labor, mental stress, and all that, but I may be wrong. I love this woman and obviously want to marry her. But we are usually good at making logical decisions, and this is the first time we have had such a disagreement. I don't know how to get her to understand the line between cooking as a necessary activity and cooking as a hobby. P.S. The fiancé has taken up cooking gourmet meals as a hobby, but now it becomes my responsibility to help out and do more housework that I don't think I should. My dad died and I'm scared my family won't get along. So yesterday after my dad comes home he eats what my mom made for him. Eggs and Spam. To be clear, he has a pre-existing medical history of high blood pressure and gout. First found out when he was admitted to the hospital in 2015 when he fell ill, and we basically had to force him to go to the hospital BC he didn't want to go. He was put on medication since, with changes to them maybe a year or so ago. So back to when after he ate. My half-sister heard a thud around 740-ish and told me to check BC. She thought maybe my parents are arguing. I go down and see my dad on the kitchen floor, my mom behind him a few feet away, and I hear him snoring. I ask my mom a question, get worried, run back upstairs and knock on my sister's door. She calls my other sister and also tells me to stop wasting time, call 911. I was scared and frantic. I wish I called 911 or saw him when he came in so I could maybe have called sooner. They get frantic too and we all start yelling at each other, and I try to maintain order also as I'm talking to 911 person. At some point in all of this my brother-in-law yells for help and I help him turn my dad onto his side. BC, he said he could choke on his saliva. My dad stops snoring and we start panicking. The EMS tells us how to perform CPR, but my sisters keep yelling, and so I try to get them working together. They finally start working on it. One is doing compression and the other giving him air and sometimes rotating. Fire department and ambulance gets here and they start doing the same thing but also have defibrillators, and honestly, I'm just in shock still. It was maybe 8:03 p.m. when they came or so, I don't remember, it's all a blur. I checked my phone for timestamp, but I called twice so I forgot when original call was placed. They called it at 8:50 p.m. and I just began to lose it. My aunt comes and my sister is trying to call my dad's work to let his bosses know. We talk about how we want my dad's arrangements and agree on cremation. BC, we don't have the money for anything else, but also my sister wants the remains. My mom is bipolar schizophrenic and my sisters and bro-in-law don't get along. Her because of a whole history that would keep you here forever if I tried to type it. My dad was a bad person, but he still chose us and tried his best to provide regardless of his fallacies. He had my mom's back too, saying he wouldn't kick her out or place her in a mental home. My sisters kinda want that, I think, but I'm scared to talk about it. My mom is okay sometimes, but also acts up BC of her mental illness sometimes, and my dad and I were her constants regardless of what happened. My mom is old and still wants to benefit from some social security services that my dad had, but my sisters and I think we should get a majority control of his account. There's a lot of renovations to be done. BC, he ignored upkeep of the house for a number of years, example, the roof. My mom is not very sad about the ordeal. BC, she had a long history of mental abuse from my dad and I understand, but we for some reason stayed together. How to move forward except for one moment at a time, and I'm still waiting for funeral home to come pick up his body. It's 8:13 a.m. now, been waiting since night before. And I have been crying, but also I can't sleep, and I'm sorry if this doesn't meet guidelines. I just need to vent. Even though I told a few friends, I'm still in disbelief. How this will moving forward. I believe it can though, but it's hard to stay positive. Recently I got engaged to my amazing fiancée Amy. I was the happiest I have ever been when Amy said yes, and was nothing but excited for our wedding. We started planning the venues, the dates, and the invites. When talking about who to invite, we both agreed to invite out coworkers, as we have worked in our respective jobs for years and like them all. As I checked that off the list, Amy spoke up and said everyone from my job can come except my work friend Tally. Tally is also one of my close friends, so this surprised me that Amy didn't want to invite her. She has met Tally multiple times and there didn't seem to be any issues. When I asked why, she said she just doesn't like her and finds our friendship uncomfortable, saying she thinks that Tally is the type of person to try to sway taken men and be the center of attention. After talking some more to see where she got this idea, it turned out this was based on nothing but Tally's looks, as even Amy admitted that Tally is always very kind to her. But still, Amy is adamant about Tally not going and said that she makes her insecure. Amy is a beautiful woman, so I don't know why she feels this way. I told Amy that if it makes her feel comfortable not having Tally at the wedding, then that is fine. But before invitations go out, I wanted to speak to her privately to let her know to save embarrassment. Amy agreed, and that was really that. We didn't speak on the matter after. A week or so later I went into work and Tally started to ignore me, only really talking if it was work related. I was confused, as it isn't just her, our coworkers have started to ignore her and acting strange to me. So I contacted her BF, only for him to be sarcastic on the phone. I asked what the problem was when he asked if I actually didn't know what happened. He then filled me in. Turned out a few days earlier Amy came to my work on my day off with invitations. I had no idea she even made them yet. And handed everyone an invite in front of Tally, then saying to Tally, "You aren't invited, women like you aren't welcome." Which has sparked everyone suggesting she is my other woman. Since then she has been harassed by some guys at work and shunned by the women. She is now looking for another job. This pissed me off and I apologized profusely, as I didn't know. When I got home that night, I confronted Amy about this. She denied it at first, but then told me she did it, but it is now not an issue because she's quitting her job. I flipped on her, saying how she clearly didn't trust me to say, and that she crossed a line doing all this behind my back. She didn't see the problem and got upset, asking me why I'm so mad, me responding, "If we are really going to get married, get your insecurities in check and grow up." I stayed at a friend's since, but have had texts from Amy, her friends, and her mother saying for this and that Amy doesn't deserve this treatment. I have made many attempts to speak to Tally privately to find out what was happening prior to contacting her BF. She brushed me off by saying she either had work to do or that there was nothing to talk about. No one would really speak to me, so I contacted her BF as a last resort. Her BF says he is going to pass on to Tally what I said to him on the phone. The wedding is currently on hold. That is also why I'm staying at my friend's. Need some distance to figure stuff out. Nothing has or ever will happen with Tally, no feelings, nothing adult, absolutely nothing. Tally is happy and in love. Her boyfriend is someone I also consider a close friend. I was happy with Amy prior to this. And Tally is more like a sister to me. Unfortunately, due to what Amy has done, all I can really do is damage control. Of course, I am planning to explain to everyone what has happened. I do not want Tally to be going through this. She is a genuinely kind person who does not deserve any of this.